All right, let's look at layer styles. Layer styles are bevel and emboss, drop shadow, glows, things like that, that are very useful throughout Photoshop. Mostly applied to text, but you can apply it to other things as well. So let's create a new document, 5 by 5 inches at 300 pixels per inch, RGB. That sounds good. And let's fill it with clouds like we did before. So just get 2 different colors in your foreground and background slots here. And filter, render clouds. All right. And since I like to make it a little bit more interesting, filter, render difference clouds. All right. And then I'm just going to do a few of those till it gets a little more interesting. Okay. And if I don't like the color exactly, I'm going to go image adjustments, hue saturation, kind of doing the stuff we did last time just to go over it again. And I'm going to, I want the thing I'm working on to be kind of pretty bright, so I think I'm going to sort of tone this down somewhat. Maybe I'll use colorize, so it's just tinted. Something like that might be cool. All right, so let's make a nice big piece of text so that we can put layer styles on. All right, so just click with your type tool and type a word. And then in your character palette, okay, if you don't see it, just go Window, Character, okay? And I'm going to use, you want to use a very bold font and big. A lot of this stuff occurs inside the letters and you won't be able to see it if you make it small. And you want it to not be black and not white. Make it some color, okay? I'm going to use Impact. That's kind of my go-to font because it's big and bold. And I'm going to make the size. You know, you can type in 150 or whatever. All right, maybe that's too big. 100 points looks good. And I'm just doing, I'll just go with this color that I had in here already. Okay, layer styles. Down here, making sure your type layer is still selected, but I'm not in the type tool anymore, right? I'm not editing like this or anything, right? I'm down the bottom of the layer palette, you'll see this FX thing. Okay, that's layer styles. I don't remember exactly why it's FX instead of something else. I think originally they called it layer effects and they just kept that icon there or whatever. So any one of these will take you into the interface. And it used to be they were organized in sort of a logical progression, sort of like one kind of built on the one before it. And now I think they rearranged the order of these to the ones that people use most are closest to the bottom, I guess, to make it so you don't have to mouse as far. But I'm going to go through them in the order that kind of makes sense to me. So let's just go into drop shadow and it will open up this interface. You can shove it off to the right somewhat if you want, because we're not actually going to say okay for some time. So drop shadow. All right. Now, any one of these things, you can click on the checkbox to turn it off and on, whatever the settings are. But to actually see the interface over here, you have to click on the word. Okay. Well, you'll see it when we go to the next one. But at the moment, we're in drop shadow, and these are the settings for drop shadow. Okay. I don't normally like describe every single setting for something, but for these, I'm going to go through and show you each thing for, say, drop shadow. But after we do a few of them, you'll see that there's a lot of similarities, and then we can go through them kind of faster. So I'm going to hit reset to default. Yeah, okay. I think my settings might be somewhat different than yours, so I made the change this to reset to default. All right. So the blending mode, we've seen before that we've just been using normal, but it's set to multiply. Okay. Anytime Photoshop thinks you're going to be making something dark, like a shadow, it will make it multiply. Okay. Anytime it thinks you're trying to make something bright, like a glow, it will set it to screen. All right. So multiply is just a slightly different version of darken. It only puts stuff down if it's darker than what's there. And screen is a version of lighten. Okay. But screen and multiply are used more than lighten or darken, actually work a little bit better. They've been around longer too. But you can always use normal. So we have a black drop shadow, right? And we can turn the opacity up or down. I can barely see it in the default settings though. So let's turn up the distance somewhat. All right. Let's try to just, before we do anything else, let's try to get a decent looking drop shadow. So the distance is how far away it is. I have no idea why this defaults back to the angle being straight up and down like this. This angle thing is this pointer points to the implied light source, right? So if you want your drop shadow to be on the lower right, which is the default kind of location where drop shadows usually go if you're just making a generic drop shadow, all right, then this thing should point to the upper left. Okay, and you get something like that. Looks a little bit better, right? And we can adjust the size. The size is how fuzzy it is, how fuzzy the soft part of the shadow is. If you turn it up too far, it just fuzzes out into nothing right away. So it's, all these are pixel dimensions, so they're relative to the size of the file. So you have to find, usually you want a kind of soft shadow. If we're just trying to make it stand out, something like this. It can be totally black or it can be very faint. Okay. Now the spread, so the distance, size, and spread right here. Okay. The spread right now, my maximum opacity is 100%. The spread is how far the maximum opacity spreads out into the soft area of the shadow. Okay. And to see that, just if I turn it up, it goes to this, right? Which is kind of an interesting effect in itself. Usually, if you're just doing regular things, you keep the spread down or almost all the way down, but it will do this, okay? Because the maximum opacity of 100% is now spread all the way out to the ends of the drop shadow. So it creates that solid effect. So that's distance, how far it is. Size is how fuzzy it is, right? And opacity is opacity, right? This is just if you want to type in a number instead of dragging it to the, I never do that, instead of dragging the direction. The use global light thing, I usually keep that unchecked, okay? It means that if this is checked and you have a bunch of layer styles that are using a light source like drop shadow and inner shadow or bevel and emboss or something, they use light sources like that. If this is checked, they'll all agree and point the same way. I never want that. I always like to kind of hand do these individually, so I pretty much always uncheck that thing. I would hide it if I could. All right, one thing though is, let's say, what if you want a white drop shadow, okay? I'm gonna click this and change it to white, and you'll see that the drop shadow just disappeared, okay? That's because multiply only puts color down if it's darker than what's there, and white is not darker than anything. So if you want a white drop shadow, you can always just set this thing to normal, okay? That always works, right? The multiply just creates a somewhat better result in certain situations, right? This looks pretty heinous, but it's, it's what I want. Okay. And see, black will still work in that way also, with normal also. Now let's say you want something like a red drop shadow, okay? If you left it on multiply, it's going to create a blended result where it's really just more red, where the red is darker than what's there. So I'm seeing the red over the lighter areas. but it's looking less red over the dark areas of the background. So if you like this result, fine. But if you're looking for a pure red drop shadow, just put it normal, okay? I'm going to put this back to black. All right, let's look down at this quality thing. Now, when they first came out with layer styles, it was a Photoshop 5.5, which was quite a long time ago, but you could see that everybody designing all the magazine covers, like at the grocery store or whatever, all got the new Photoshop because everybody had beveled and embossed type everywhere, and it all looked kind of the same. But they've added more and more controls to things in here, so you can actually fine tune a lot of stuff to avoid looking, very similar. And one of them is where we get down into this quality thing. Now this, what this thing is right here that we're looking at is a line plot, right? Showing how the colors or how the opacity falls off from the most opaque to the least opaque part. It's falling off in a linear fashion, and there it is. Okay, if you go to the little pull down thing, here you can see it uses different sorts of curves. So for example, if I do this one with two humps, or this one, see there, you can see that it's going to opacity 2 times, right? It creates an interesting looking effect. So for drop shadow, maybe this isn't particularly useful, but you can use these contour lines. For some of the other layer styles, they're quite useful, right? Here, maybe it's just like, if instead of linear, maybe I want to try this slight S curve, or something like that to get a little bit of results, okay? And if these presets aren't enough for you, you can click right on the curve itself, and it opens this curve editor, and you can make, your own. All right, so so that's giving you plenty of flexibility. There's also this noise thing here, which to me is completely useless because this is a place where they haven't added a lot of options. And if you can't control the size of the grains of noise or the shape of them or anything like that, it's really not that useful. All right, drop shadow. I'm going to turn that off by unchecking it. And then let's, like I said, I'm going to go through them in the order that makes sense to me, probably because it's the old-fashioned way that they did it, and it's still stuck in my head. But to me, drop shadow and then inner shadow, we're looking at the two shadow types, okay? So I got to click on the word inner shadow, not just the checkbox. And you'll see that we don't need to go through all these because the controls are all the same, okay? Except the shadows occurring inside. All right, it looks kind of like an inner glow because there's not very, sorry, let me hit make default, okay? Yeah, it looks like it already was. There's not much, no distance to it, but normally the inner shadow should look like this, right? So whereas the drop shadow is kind of like the letters are floating above the page, casting a shadow. This is like the letters are carved into the page and the shadows on the inside of the letters. It really, I mean, you can pile up a lot of layer styles just to make a cool looking piece of type or whatever, but it's really not particularly useful to do inner shadow and drop shadow at the same time. It's kind of it works against each other. So all these settings are the same, except for instead of spread, we have choke, which does exactly the same thing, except it does it inwards instead of outwards. Okay, so you can change the direction of your applied light source, etc. Okay, I'm going to uncheck that and let's go to outer glow. Okay, let me hit make default. Looks like that already is. Or reset to default. I guess I was supposed to be hitting. Well, I wasn't reading, Greg. Make default means I probably did that on the left. It doesn't really matter, what my settings are because I'm going through everything anyway. Reset to default, but I already hit make this the default, so whatever. Okay. So outer glow. Let me just make it like whiter. It used to be kind of like a light yellow always. So it's a glow outside the letters, okay? And it's going to be set to screen, I'm pretty sure, on yours, but you can make it normal. I'm just going to leave mine on normal. So I can turn the opacity up and down. If you don't see it enough, turn up the size, right? There's noise in it, but again, I don't find the noise useful on these things. It has spread, just like the drop shadow did. Now you can do a solid color, right? And if I have this set to normal, I can make it any color I want. Or you can use a gradient, okay? And if I go to the pull down thing, you know, they used to include just like a bunch of standard gradients, which was better than, now they give you these folders. I'm not sure if you guys are going to get the same thing I have here. These are very useful. I'm going to go into basics and just hit this one, which is foreground to background. Okay, so it gives me, I can put a gradient around there. And maybe I can make this a little bit better. And so you can put in whatever colors you want on this thing. I'm just clicking and putting in. All right, so you can make gradients in the glow. Okay, and it doesn't need to be 100%. It can just be a subtle thing like that. All right. It's there used to be this nice collection of just standard gradients that they whatever, made it more complicated and less useful to me. But one other thing is the technique. Okay, the softer one is just like kind of a general glow that comes out behind the letters, whereas there's also this precise where the glow is exactly aligned to the edge of the letters, right? Creates a different kind of effect, less glowy looking, but kind of interesting. And did I forget my gradient that I had altogether? You can also, if you have a spread, will push out the location of the gradient. It works the same way in terms of opacity as it did on the shadows and glows, but it also pushes the gradient outwards. Okay, and we have our quality thing here. So if this is a good place where I might want to do a double hump if I want to have a more complicated looking shadow. It's pretty interesting looking, or complicated looking glow. Okay, so outer glow, I'm turning it off, and let's look at inner glow and reset to default is what I'm supposed to be hitting there. Inner glow is just occurs inside the letters. Let's turn up the size a little bit so we can see it, and the opacity. Okay, so the settings are all pretty much the same. If you want to use some solid color, you probably want to change this to normal. And it can be softer or precise. And the only real difference between that inner glow has, it's different from outer glow, is this little place here where it's center or edge, meaning you can start in the middle, okay, and go outwards, or start from the edge and go inwards, okay. So inner glow. Let's now look at bevel and emboss, all right. And at some point, we're going to start accumulating these to try to make an interesting looking layer style. So bevel and emboss, reset to default, all right. So by default, it makes this kind of subtle looking bevel, but if I turn up the size, Should be able to see it more, okay? And like any of these layer styles, if you turn it up too far, it's just gonna fuzz out into nothing. So you have to find the sweet spot there for that, okay? So let's look at these settings. There's different styles of bevel. I'm just gonna leave it on inner bevel at the moment and go look at the settings and then go back and try the different ones. So the technique, first of all, get it so you can see it well, right? Adjust the size. And the depth isn't really very clearly, it doesn't really, to me, make it look deeper. It makes it look kind of more defined or something. Okay. But the technique is smooth or chisel hard, which gives you nice hard edges, or chisel soft, which I don't know what's really soft about that, except that whenever there's curves in the letters, it looks like there's kind of like chisel marks on it or something, which is kind of an interesting effect, but I usually use smooth or chisel hard. Okay, we can make it go up or down. This is down, this is up. It looks a little bit like somebody just took the light source and dragged it around to the other side, although it's not exactly like that actually. Tried to figure out if it really was or not, but you could kind of imagine that that's just the light on the bottom right instead of upper left, but it's not actually. It's a little more. There is a difference between up and down. All right, so we have our size, okay? I mean chisel hard, and we have soften, okay? I kind of like a combination of hard, instead of smooth, I find that hard and then with soften turned up creates sort of an, it's kind of like soft embossed, but it still keeps its shape a little bit better or something. I don't know. I always seem to do it that way. Now, dropping down to the shading area, this is not just a direction because it's like the point is the light source. So imagine that this circle is a glass bowl that's upside down on top of you, and you can always find the sun if it's daytime somewhere on that bowl, right? So if it's closer to the edge of the bowl, it's on the horizon, right? It's near the, it's low in the sky. And if it's in the middle of the bowl, it's at noon overhead. So this doesn't only change the direction, but how far overhead it is. So if I put it in the middle, it's going to look kind of flattened out, maybe, because the light's straight overhead. If I put it way down next to the horizon, it's going to be more contrasty. Okay, so you can create quite a few different effects by controlling this. And again, global light, I'm turning that off. I usually do that first or leave it off. You have numbers for angle and altitude if you're trying to, mostly if you're just following a tutorial or something, you're trying to make something look the same. Gloss contour, here you can do all these things, which could be interesting. Like if you're trying to make something look metallic, even just that definitely has sort of a brassy or copper quality to it. With these layer styles, there's a lot of people made a lot of like sort of canned tutorials for like how to make perfect reflective water or how to make chrome or how to make, carved granite. And it's all through these complicated recipes made out of layer styles. And you follow it all along and you'd be surprised. It just looks like simple controls, but people have figured out ways to make quite convincing materials with these. Anyway, so down here we have our colors for the highlight area and the shadow area using screen and multiply. But like with anything else, if you want a purple highlight, you can have it, okay? And if you want it to really look purple, you got to change it to normal. Okay, doesn't look very good, but all right, so that is inner bevel. Now, let's just look at these. So inner bevel means that the bevel occurs inside the type. Outer bevel means it's outside the type. The letters are left alone. Okay, so it's on the background. Emboss is a combination of inner and outer bevel. Okay, and it looks kind of nice, I think. I don't know, find emboss kind of interesting looking. Pillow emboss is dented in on the edges, right? And stroke emboss only works if you have a stroke layer style applied, which we don't yet. I'm going to leave this on emboss, I think. And let's start accumulating some, try to make some nice looking layer style. All right, so I got an emboss that I kind of like. Let's now, that's a good one to do next. Let's do satin next, okay? For all you satin worshipers. Now, let me hit restore to default. Okay, so, so satin is weird. It's kind of like an inner shadow that sort of meanders over the surface of the letters, and it will make it with certain colorings, it'll look kind of like satiny, right? You look at satin sheets, they have like highlights that kind of ramble over the surface of them, right? And this will do that. It's actually like a checkerboard that's bent to the surface of the letters and very blurred out. Okay. This is one place where I always use this contour thing. Okay, so if I adjust multiply, you can see it more strongly. If I adjust the distance, okay, it does stuff like this. There you can see how it's like a checkerboard, sort of. I guess you can call it that. Sand is a thing that I like to apply to embossed letters because and turn like way down so you can barely see it. It just gives like a little bit of variety or interest, so it doesn't look quite so flat, and it's just like a little bit of randomness almost. And you could make this something lighter, right? And change the blending mode to normal or screen, and then turn it down, and you get something that looks more like highlights. I think I'm going to keep it on dark for the moment. And now here's a place where, like, if you want it to be more complicated, you can just use, like, say, the double humped one. Whoa. So that's quite the thing. Maybe like this one. Yeah, see, something like that. It looks, you can make it look kind of like tiger's eye or something like that. Just a little subtlety there. All right, so I have bevel emboss, I have satin. Let's go look at stroke. So I'm clicking on the word stroke. I'm going to hit reset the default. You guys are already going to be at the default. I'm just doing it because to make mine look like yours. So I'm going to turn up the size a little bit. So there's a stroke around the edge of the letters. It can be inside the text, outside the text, right? Or centered on the edge of the text. I think I'll put it, I guess I'll leave it uncentered. And you can do, you know, whatever crazy size you want, probably something more reasonable is going to be better. And you can change the color to whatever looks good, right? And instead of color, it could be a gradient, right? Well, I gotta figure out a shortcut to fix these gradients. Okay, anyway, well, here's a black to white gradient. I can change the angle of the gradient, etc. Okay, it looks pretty cool. I can click right on it. Let's see, maybe I want this to go here. Right, so you can make a nice looking thing kind of like that. If I don't want it to be so intense, I can turn down the opacity of it. Okay. Oh, and also in addition to gradient, there's pattern. All right. Shouldn't have done that, I guess. All right, let's see what patterns are in here. Now, I don't know what you guys are going to have for pattern. Maybe nothing, or what do we got here? All right, so there's some patterns. Patterns are easy to make in Photoshop. You just like select an area with your rectangle marquee tool and go edit define pattern, and it will then show up at this list. These are just like random things. I'm not even really sure if you have the same stuff or not. Okay, I'm going to leave it on this thing, I think. Maybe I'll just make it solid. I'm going to go back to color. All right. So let's see. Bevel and emboss. Oh, so then the three that are remaining are color overlay, gradient overlay, and pattern overlay. These basically just fill the text with a color, a gradient, or pattern. Okay. And they have priority from the top down. So if you have 100% color overlay and you turn on gradient, you're not gonna see it, right? If you have 50% of each of them, you'll see a little bit of all three. Okay. By the way, these pluses over here are ones that you can add multiples. So if you want to have two drop shadows that are different, you can hit the plus and have actually two drop shadows there, okay, for what it's worth. So if I go to color overlay, all right, here's a place where I can just add solid color if I want to, all right. It still shows the layer styles that are there, or if I could turn it off by clicking the check, and I could turn the amount down or up. Maybe I should get a color that looks more different from what I have. Okay. And then if I want to cut a gradient overlay, I'll just use this thing here. So you can fill the stuff with gradient or pattern. Okay. And again, I'm not really convinced that you guys have these same gradients. Maybe you do. And you can, same patterns, and you can change the scale of a pattern up or down. And I can make it say screen, so it only put the color down where it's lighter than what's there, or some other interesting blending mode. Okay, I'm just going to go back to the gradient overlay, I think. Maybe none of them. I'm just going to stick with this. All right, so I think we covered all of them. So so that's how we make layer styles, generally speaking, and just try to make like a nice looking layer style there, right? I'm going to say okay. Now a couple other things. It used to be that if you wanted to put your layer style on another layer, you had to go through all that stuff, right? We get back into it just by double clicking on here, and it will open back up again. And you had to go through and like write down all the numbers on every one for a while. But you can just right click and copy layer style. Right there, copy layer style. Okay, so I copy the layer style to the clipboard. Okay, so we can use it on another layer. Now, an interesting thing here is that layer styles aren't just for type, okay? They're for any layer that's not a solid layer like the background, that has transparent edges to it because it works on edges, right? So letters have lots of edges and then they're transparent in between. So they're the perfect thing to look at and what it's usually used for. But let's try it on a layer that we're going to paint on. So let's hit the new layer icon down by the trash can and right click on that and paste layer style. So we have the same layer style on there, but we haven't put anything on it yet, right? So let's get our paintbrush. Now, to get the same effect as the type, the paintbrush by default is going to have a fuzzy, soft edge, and it's going to produce, it's not going to do it quite like this. So to get the right effect, I'm just going to right click here and make sure the hardness is turned all the way up and make sure my opacity and stuff is turned all the way up, and then just try painting, okay? Woohoo! It's very cool, isn't it? So you can paint with layer styles. You can make dots even. Or if I went into the erase tool, okay. Interestingly enough, with the eraser, I seem to have to click it a couple times to get it to go all the way down. The eraser is this guy right here. All right, so that is a look at layer style.